Hello and welcome back to Project Spark. Welcome back to Let's Build a World. I am the ConflictNerd, and it has been quite some time since the last episode in this little series here. The reason for that being that I really didn't have the time to put into something like Project Spark, but now that I do, well, the series is back. Today, we're not going to be doing all that much, really. No huge changes. 2 new buildings and some trees are going to be put in. Mainly because I'm still getting back into Project Spark. I'm still trying to work out exactly how it works because it has been about 3 or 4 months since I last played it. The previous episode in this series, yeah, that's when I last played the game. Or maybe a week or 2 before that. But either way, it's been quite some time. So right here, we're going ahead and we're putting in yet another building, sorting out the doors so that there's no gap between it and the building itself. Nothing particularly special about this building, although I do like how the windows all turned out on it. In fact, on both buildings that I put up in this video, I'm actually really happy with how the windows turned out. I think they look really good, actually. I'm kind of impressed at how decent they look. I mean, none of them particularly match, none of them are perfectly positioned, but we were never really going for that anyway with this town, were we? That was never the plan. Nothing is supposed to be symmetrical and perfect and exact. Everything has that little bit of an angle, or it's slightly off, or it's a little bit too small or a bit too big, and it makes it a bit quirky, and it gives it that one thing that I always talked about. It gives it character. And that's what I really like. Going ahead here and using the rustic hall to add a little bit more detail to the roof of this place. I like this building. It's a bit strange. It's a bit taller than I really thought it would be. I didn't really go into this building with a plan. I didn't really think, oh, I'll build a nice tall building here. But I think it just has that little bit of, no, it's shaped like a boot, if anything. But it just has something about it that I really like. I also realized that something I haven't done with these buildings is furnish the outside of them. And that sounds a little bit strange, but what I mean is, you know, just that little chair in the doorway, it just makes it look a little bit more friendly, a little bit more homely, like someone might sit out there on a nice day and just chat to those that walk by. So that's something I'm going to start doing, and I only do it once in this episode. I only did it once in this little session of building, but that was just to remind me to do it more often. So that chair sitting there is simply so I remember to furnish the outside of buildings. And that's something I would actually highly recommend. I've seen some people building things in Project Spark and other games, and the insides of things are so beautifully furnished, but the outside is just a little bit bare. You've got your building looks great, and I firmly believe that the 2 buildings I put up here are pretty good looking. But they do need that little something, and furnishing the outside turns out to be what they needed. And I'm really happy that I've kind of stumbled upon this whole furnishing the outside of the buildings thing. Using, of course, the same windows here that we've been using the whole way through this entire build. We're not really going to be using much out of the ordinary, although I should mention that at the beginning of this series, I said I would be using only base game items. That's not so much going to be the case anymore. In fact, the door on this house is from the castle pack. I'm not 100% sure what it's called, but it is from the castle pack. I actually bought the castle pack on a live stream a long time ago and tried to build a castle, and it's alright. It's a pretty good pack. I can't really see me using a lot of it, if I'm perfectly honest, mainly because this is sort of supposed to be a bit of a rustic town, a bit of a strange town that wouldn't really make sense to have a huge castle. Although I may use the walls of it to make a bit of a dock or something like that. I know we already have a dock, but I might go back and change it a little bit and make it look like there's stone and stuff like that holding up the platforms. Maybe. I might not do it, but it's just something I'm considering to get some use out of the castle pack, because I did pay for it and then I stopped playing the game, so it's probably a good idea to go ahead and use that. Anyway, as I do, just adding in the details here around the building to make it look like there's some stone and some foundations going on. And then I found this. I've never seen the well before. I wanted somewhere to put it. So I decided to put it over on the farm here. I think it looks really good, honestly. I think just having the well in the field there nicely fills up a bit of space, and all it really needs now is a bit of a path going to it. The path here, of course, being made up of 2 different kinds of terrain paint, just giving it that little bit more depth and making it look like it is actually used and isn't just a bit of a perfect path going on there. So we're going to be coming into the next building very soon. We're just looking through things here, but the next building is going to be going... I was going to put it there originally, but I realized it was too symmetrical with the other tower, so it's actually going back here. And I honestly like it back here. I think it fills in the space nicely. There isn't really the room here for a long building, and using the rustic hall would just look strange considering the building next to it is a rustic hall. So using the tower here worked out quite nicely. Painting around it, of course, to make it look like it has some foundations. But this is honestly another example of a building I'm really happy with. This, of course, being the second building, the one I mentioned, but it's just strange. I'm usually not happy with things that I build, but this one I am happy with. And it's honestly quite simple. There's nothing really coming out of it other than on the roof, but it's so simple. I think it's the windows that do it for me, and you'll see that in a second. But right now, we're going ahead and we're sorting out the terrain, and this is something I honestly thought I would have done a long time ago, smooth out the terrain. You might remember me mentioning it in one of the previous episodes, I don't know which one it was, but this bump here in the road was supposed to be flattened and smoothed out a long time ago, and I never did it, so, well, at least we've got that done. Let's not say I don't finish things, I do finish what I started, even if it's just getting rid of a bump in a road. But here we go, adding yet another rustic hole to the top of a building. This time round, I wanted it to sit up because I wanted to put some windows on it, and I wanted to just add a little bit of definition to this tower, and I do get it to sit right in the end. I think it looks pretty good, to be honest. I think it adds a little bit of height to the tower, it makes it look like it's got several tiers to it, it doesn't look like it's awkwardly sitting in the tower, and I suppose something I should mention is that I'm building everything here with the mindset that it's most likely going to be viewed from below. You're likely going to be looking up at it or looking at it from a distance. You're very unlikely to be having a top-down view on it, and if you do, that's because you've gone out of your way to get one. In the same way, there are parts of this building that aren't really all that detailed, and the reason for that is quite simply that I don't know why you'd go around there. There's no point to go around to the back of this building because there's nothing really there. And I was sort of toying around with the idea of not doing anything on the back of it at all, because there's nothing there, you know, there's no point to have windows because they just look out at a cliff. But I realized that it did look a bit bare, so I did some detailing on the back of this building, but nothing particularly major, because honestly it didn't need it. It just doesn't, and I think it sort of looks okay with minimal detailing on the back. But there we go, that's the front of it done, and now we're going on to the sides, and we'll move on to the back in a second. But this building in general, I am actually really happy with. Again, I don't know what it is, I think it might be the windows, but it just looks pretty good. And here's me toying with the idea of doing the back or not doing the back. As I said, we do go ahead and do it. We have some tilted windows that are closed, and honestly, I think, I do think the easiest way to manage this was to just have some closed windows, because why would you have them open? You would just be looking at a cliff, so there wasn't really much point. We're moving up to the top now, though. We're going to add some big circular windows to this thing. I was a little bit worried this might look like a face with 2 circular windows here, but thankfully it doesn't really, which is kind of useful. It would have looked a bit silly if it did. Of course, adding some windows to this side as well. Open windows this time, because it makes sense, because it's a bit higher, sunlight can actually get in. And I think it looks pretty good, if I'm honest with you. I do genuinely think that this building, as simple as it may be, you know, there's not a lot coming out of it, there's nothing particularly special about it. I think it looks good. I think it does the job, and I think it's a nice addition. I like the fact that it's got a couple of windows that are lit up and not necessarily casting light, but the whole thing just looks pretty good. Anyway, right here, we have this weird gap in the cliff. And I honestly don't know what the original purpose of this was going to be. I can't remember what I set out for this to be, but I realized we already have a dock. So I might make some kind of shipwreck down here in the future, but right now what I wanted to do was go ahead and just add some trees and logs and stuff like that to make it look like it's a nice secluded area that you can go down to and get to the water, but it's not really, it's not where anyone lives. It doesn't really serve any purpose. It's just a nice place to go and sit around and be a bit lazy and, you know, look at and enjoy the water, do some fishing, you know, whatever you want to do in Project Spark. I honestly couldn't tell you. But I am really happy with how this turns out. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It's not really got a lot to it, to be honest. It's just a couple of logs and trees and flowers, but it all comes together quite nicely, and I think the fact that it is kind of simple adds to it. It doesn't look like a rainforest or a jungle. It just looks like a couple of trees that you could walk through to get down to the water's edge and chill. And that is pretty much that. You can see here, if you look closely, the two doors I used to make this work are sort of clipping with each other, so I'm going to have to do some toying around with that to sort it out and maybe just use one door here. Well, ideally I would like to use one door here, although I'll probably just set them up to not open. You can see here what I was saying about this area being quite secluded. It does look nice though, it serves its purpose, it sort of fills in this gap quite naturally and doesn't look like it's built or placed or anything. You can see the tower there looking pretty good. And this is what I mean by you see everything from ground level, you're looking up at everything, so you can't really see that the rustic hall on top of this doesn't perfectly blend in. And that's the way I've been building this whole thing. Nothing perfectly blends in, but you can't see it because you're not looking at it from the top down in the way that I would be when I'm building it. So that's kind of useful. We're coming up to the fountain here. The well in the farm here. And that is pretty much it. That's Project Spark. Let's build a world. Episode 5. Episode 6 will be a thing. Again, I would like to apologize for the huge delay and hiatus, but we are back. We're continuing the series. But that is going to be it for this episode, so thank you very much for watching. I've been the ConflictNerd, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.